accounts receivable from a service writer perspective. I'm just looking at my main RO writer window, and down here in my work in progress, I've got Ron Stevens with his 2009 Ford Escape. Ron brought in his vehicle, and we were going to get some service done, a fuel pump, remove and replace on this here. So as I'm going to finalize this invoice, we're going to start out our conversation with, as I go to finalize my invoice, in this case, my profit has fallen below my margin, and it wants me to validate my mileage. Once I've done both, it's going to bring me to my payments window. So before we do anything else, at least accounts receivable related, what you'll notice is in the upper right-hand corner, under my payment method, I've got cash, I've got checks, I've got credit cards, and I have two additional icons. Those are charge to third party, and those are one-time charge. But the concept of a charge to a third party is I have a customer that has an open account, and he's sending another vehicle over that may not be necessarily associated with his account. And so we want to charge that third party account to the open account. So again, that'll let me search through my open accounts and charge this transaction to an existing established account inside of our writer. It's also used sometimes for customers that do national fleet work. So I've got a customer, ABC Painting, that's managed by and or handled by ARI, and I'd like to consolidate the AR underneath ARI, so I could use third-party billing or charge to a third party to take that ABC Painting invoice and associate it in my accounts receivable with ARI as the parent company. One-time charge says I'm going to allow this transaction to be charged to accounts receivable. However, I am not going to open an account for this customer. So the next time they come in, they don't have any open or available credit. They won't be able to charge something to an account unless we go through and, again, do it as a one-time charge. With either of these, they can be password protected, meaning if I said I'd like to charge that to a third party, it tells me that I need a level 9 password in order to do that. And if I was going to go through and put in my password, again, with a charge to third party, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to search my existing customer base to find those open accounts in order to charge to that third-party customer. I'm going to do a one-time charge, the same concept of, except there, after I put in my password, all it wants to know is, as I'm sending out statements, how frequently will I be sending the statement? Now, before we finalize this to accounts receivable, we're going to take a step back for just a second, because there's a third option that can appear in that upper right-hand corner as far as payments are concerned. That has to do with whether or not the customer has an open AR account. And then now when I go back and finalize, it's going to give me again my prompt about my profit, ask me to validate the mileage, and then get to my payment window where again the button now says charge to AR accounts. Now if you notice, available credit $300. This is a $610.82 invoice. So if I try to charge it to an AR account, it tells me there's not enough available credit to close this invoice. What I could do is I could charge my $300 to accounts receivable. So then now it's going to ask me if I'd like to charge the full payment to my type open account, and we're going to say that we don't want to charge the full amount. So what we want to actually do is we want to do it in reverse. We're going to do $310.82 as cash, and then we can charge the balance to our AR account. So if you're going to do a split payment, handle the other portion of it first, and then come back and put the balance onto accounts receivable. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cancel back out. I'm going to finalize this transaction finally for the last time. We go ahead and get our profit warning and our mileage prompt, and then we get to our payment window again. Now because I've got $1,000 in available credit, I can hit charge to AR account and go ahead and click on finalize. It asks if we'd like to print a final repair order. The only nuances or difference with printing that final repair order would be that what you'll notice is it says on account as the payment type, and then it still shows a balance due. In this case, the entire amount of $610.82. I won't schedule an appointment for this customer and vehicle, except for maybe to have him come back in and pay against his AR balance. But so now we're back to just our main RO writer window. Fast forward in time, Ron Stevens has made a payment. So he walked in the door and he said, hey, you know what, I want to give you $200 against my outstanding accounts receivable balance. So as a service writer, I'm going to start out by going into the accounts receivable module. If he wants to make a payment against his balance, I'm going to go ahead and click on Post Payment. We search for our customer, so in this case, Ron Stevens, and you'll notice in my customer list, there is one customer in my search string that came back with 2 asterisks in front of. As you look through your list, anybody that has an open account gets prefixed with the asterisk. That's intended to make it easier for you to go ahead and find those open account customers. So I'll go ahead and I'll find Ron Stevens. When I click on OK, it takes me into my Post AR Payments window. So Ron came in today. He said he's going to pay $200 against his outstanding balance. So where it says enter amount of payment, we're going to put $200 into this window. What the system wants us to do is to apply this payment, the $200, to a transaction underneath his account. He might have 5, 10, 50 transactions. So what's really asking is, well, which transactions is he paying in this particular instance? So when you have a single transaction, pretty easy to go ahead and just apply it by using the auto apply button. It says, well, there's only one transaction, so the $200 is going to go against that particular transaction. I'm going to click on Clear Payments, because you can also apply it manually. So if I wanted to go ahead and apply the $200 to this transaction, I double click on it, and I would tell it that $200 goes against this transaction. If you had more than one transaction, you could go through and you could select each individual transaction to apply the monies to. What the auto apply button does is it applies the payments based upon the oldest invoice to the newest. And so again, what it's actually looking for is in alphanumeric sequence, the lowest reference number to the highest reference number when it does the auto apply. So it's not necessarily 100% based upon the date the invoice was closed. Again, it's looking at that reference number. Once we've applied the payment, so in this case, we've told it $200 is getting paid against this invoice, then at the top of the screen, we'll go ahead and hit Post Payment. Now, there are 2 options, Post Payment or Post and Continue. At the front counter, you're almost always going to hit Post Payment. My scenario where the customers came in to make a payment, we're going to just take that payment from the customer. So we're going to do Post Payment. Notice when we go to make the payment, I said we had 5 different payment types when we were in the main hour writer window. That's because we could charge it to accounts receivable, we could do a one-time charge or a third-party charge, depending on what state we were in as we went through. In this case, it says, well, I'm not going to allow you to charge an AR balance to accounts receivable again. We've got to use cash, check, and or credit cards. So in this case, he went ahead and he gave us $200 in cash so we can save the payment. And actually, we'd like to print a receipt for this payment. We probably would for a customer that was standing right in front of us. I'm going to want some validation that we did take $200 in cash from him against his AR balance. So again, we could go through and print a receipt if we so chose. I'm going to go ahead and say no to that question, get us back into our accounts receivable module. Over here into my reports section. And the only report that I would probably point you towards that would be a commonly used report for a service writer would be this customer AR transactions report. If I just wanted to print a report for a customer of all of their AR transactions over a period of time, then the customer AR transactions report would be the one that would be applicable. Getting back into my main core point of sale, as we get into history, so I go to look at Ron Stevens' history, and maybe he brings another vehicle in, maybe it's just going to see what's going on with this particular transaction. But as I get into the actual history, there's my transaction, 61082. If I go into display repair order, and then over to the calculations tab, what we'll see is, well, all right, the amount due at finalized was 61082, and his current invoice balance is 41082, because we made a $200 payment against this transaction. So if I wanted to see the detail, I could see the AR payments that have been associated with this invoice, and you can see that we've got just a singular $200 payment. If he had come in and made a $50 payment once a week over a 4-week time frame, we would see each of those listed individually. So essentially, with any AR transaction, we can follow the payment history by using that AR payments or this invoice. Close back out of here, back out of the history, and one last piece. Mr. Stevens has showed back up again, has that exact same 2009 Ford Escape, and we're going to start a new transaction for him. And maybe it's the same day, maybe it's next week, next month, next year. But there is an option to turn on what's called an AR warning. And so when I start a new transaction, if I have that turned on, it tells me that, oh, by the way, there is an outstanding balance in accounts receivable. And he's got a $1,000 credit limit with a $410.82 balance. So therefore, he only has $589.18 available. Since the oldest charge was today, it falls into the 0 to 30 day bucket. What it will do is it will tell you, and it's based upon the oldest charge. So he's got charges over the last 120 days, and they've all been spread out. Some of them last week, some of them a couple months ago, some of them 4 months ago. Based upon the date of the oldest open charge is what will show at that bottom, 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or 90 plus, just so we can tell whether or not they're paying their accounts on time. As I get into my estimate window, so it brings us in, and we're going to go over from our service request tab to our parts and labor tab. What we'll see is when we have an open account, you get this little option here that says account. And if I click on that, it'll take me right back into that same AR warning. So even if I don't see it as I start the transaction, it's still available to me as a reference point